Hi, everyone. Okay, we're on to birth number four finally. So, my last kiddo. And this baby was my one baby that was not born in my home state of Nevada. He was born in Santa Cruz, California. And it was a very good experience. And if I were going to rank it, I would say it was my or my second best birth experience. So, what made it so great? As you know, with my third labor and delivery, it was traumatic. It was a nightmare. It was not fun. I had some really bad memories from it. It haunted me for a long time. I couldn't talk about the birth experience without crying for years. Um, my sister had a traumatic birthing experience 13 months after me that I was there for, and that really triggered a lot of memories from my own birth. So I struggled with that as well. I couldn't talk about her birth experience without crying as well because both were very traumatic for me. And I know that for my sister, she still cannot talk about that labor and delivery without crying. It was hard. So going from that third birth experience into the fourth, I wanted to make sure that I had more control. With my second birth, it was super medicalized and it was great. Great experience. I had a great nursing staff. My physician did a good job. And then with number three, same hospital, same physician. I did not win the lottery with my nursing staff, and I got induced, and the hospital was already full. And so they pulled a nurse that usually worked postpartum into labor and delivery. And so it wasn't, she wasn't as experienced um, as some of the other nurses, and she was also going back to postpartum rather than staying in labor and delivery the whole time. And so there were times when I was not being supervised. My vitals were going nuts. My blood pressure was off the charts because I was in so much pain. And she was nowhere to be found. And she refused to give me an epidural, even though my physician had okayed it for that stage of labor that I was in. It was a real doozy. But going into my fourth birth, I wanted to have control. I didn't want to be hooked up to a bed. I didn't want to have to be at the mercy of, nursing staff or anyone else. I wanted more control. If I was in pain, I wanted to have the ability to reposition my body. So all of these things, with all of that in mind, I went into my fourth pregnancy. And with my fourth pregnancy, the rest of my kids were 2 years apart, and he was nearly 3 years difference from my third child. And that's because he was not planned. We were done with three, but I'm so happy he snuck in and we got number four, my only boy, actually. So it was a happy accident. Um, but anyway, so we lived in California, and I really wanted to make sure that I was going somewhere where they would let me have control. And so in Santa Cruz, they have a birthing center, and that's where we had my son. And this birthing center, I actually was born in a birthing center. So, I come by it naturally. But the birthing center I was born into was really just like a doctor's office that could house women for a little while after giving birth. But 12 hours after my mom had me, she was going home. So it wasn't like a hospital situation at all. She did have a physician, though, who did deliver me. So with my son, I did have him in a birthing center, but the birthing center I had him in was half birthing center. I mean, it was all together. It's not like it was two separate businesses, but it was birthing center and surgical center. And it was also just like literally down the street, like a couple of minutes from a hospital with a high level NICU. And in this facility, they had the ability to do emergency C sections, and they had a physician on staff at all times. I actually was going to a nurse practitioner, but she did not deliver my son because she was not on her, the rotation, the after hours rotation at the time. Instead, I was delivered by a family physician, family medical physician, and actually, it was great. It was really wonderful. So here's what happened. I started to get contractions 2 weeks before my son was due. And I hadn't really had that with my other kids. I would get Braxton Hicks, but not like real contractions. And so I was dilating and I was effacing. And by the time, a week before his birth, I was like, Mom, because she lived in Nevada and we had just moved to California, Northern California, and I was there all by myself. And it's like, Mom, I need you to come. I don't know. I think this baby is going to be coming early. And so she flew out. And and of course, once she flew out, my body was like stressed because, I'm like, oh man, I made my mom take off from work and I made her come here. And then all of those contractions stopped. To the point where my mom was thinking about flying back to Nevada. So it was one of those things like the more I wanted to give birth, the less likely that I was going to give birth. And so I really just worked on relaxing. Um, some things that I did throughout my pregnancy, and some of these things are, probably old wives' tales, and some of them are backed by research. But again, I wanted to have the maximum amount of control. So some things that I would do, I tried to encourage good positioning for my son. So I would sit on a yoga ball and bounce and roll all the time when I was doing laundry, when I was hanging out with my kids, anything that I was doing where I was sitting, I was trying to sit on a yoga ball. And for me, it helped with lower back pain. It helped my body relax. Um, and from some reading that I did, it potentially could help your baby position more correctly. So head down, ready to deliver, rather than a breech presentation, which would lead to a C-section more likely than not. So I was doing that. Um, is it red leaf raspberry? I think it's red raspberry leaf tea. If any of you moms check out any of those kind of holistic granola labor and delivery sites, you'll see about that. And that's one of those things that I don't believe is backed by research, but the idea behind it is that it's supposed to help strengthen your uterus, so you can have a quicker labor. It's not like it's going to induce labor, it's just that it's supposed to help make labor more quick. And I started taking that at about 20, 22 weeks, and I would drink it every day. Um, but anyway, so I continued on with that, just try to relax, go on lots of walks. A, because I like the outdoors and I like to go for walks, and B, to encourage those contractions and also to relax. It's relaxing to me to be in nature. And it is for most people. In fact, as far as pain relief goes, sunlight is shown to help reduce pain, as are plants. So being outside is the perfect way to help with your pain. All right, I'm in the desert, so I'm very dry. It's very dry here. I need to have some water. All right, thank you. So, my body just didn't start doing the contractions. It just was done, and my mom was thinking about going home. Um, and I just let it be. I was like, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. I've done all I can do. I don't want to induce labor, because last time I induced labor, it was a really bad experience. And after that, I'm of the mind that baby wasn't ready, and baby does best when they're fully cooked. It was my belief. As long as mom is healthy and safe, there are situations where baby needs to come out, and that's the safest thing possible. But for my situation, when I didn't have the risk factors, I didn't have high risk pregnancy, he was doing great in there in my womb. I just wanted to let him cook as long as he needed to cook. So one night, I was watching TV with my mom and my husband, and 9, 10 o'clock, I got ready to get up and go to bed. And when I got up, my water broke. No contractions, nothing. And I have like super, water. Like it never breaks on its own. With my other child, my third, it didn't break until I was like dilated to a 9 or a 10. Right. And so this just broke out of nowhere. And at first I was like, oh man, did I pee my pants? Because all ladies know when you're pregnant, there's a lot of pressure on your uterus and you have more fluid in your body than normal. So that would not be something that would be out of the realm of possibility. So I stood up, my water broke, and then I was like, oh man, did I pee my pants? And then I moved around a little bit and more came out, and it was very clear that I wasn't urinating, that it was in fact my waters. So I was like, okay, well, I made a big mess. And I was like, I don't want to go to the birthing center yet. I hadn't started my contractions, and I knew that I had some time. I just needed to avoid like hot tubs or bathtubs where I could get bacteria in there, and I just needed to know what time my water broke so I could let them know and make sure that I was delivering in a reasonable and safe amount of time. So I went and I took a shower, just to clean up. Um, and I lived 50 minutes away from my birthing center, typically during traffic. Mercifully, that night it was 30 minutes, but typically it was 50 minutes. And we had prepared a emergency delivery kit that we kept in the back of my car and my husband's car, just in case I went into labor and, tried to get to the birthing center. And if I wasn't able to, California traffic is bonkers. Anyone who lives there knows that. And so I just wanted to make sure that I had a backup plan. So I had all of that in the back of the vehicle. Um, when I was showering, I started getting contractions, and they kind of hit fairly hard right away. And so I knew I needed to hurry. And my mom helped clean up the mess I made. And she was like, "What are you doing? You need to get there. Go. I don't want to deliver this baby for you. You got to go." And so my husband and we took my bag that I had packed at about, 30 weeks. I packed the bag. Um, and we had it there, headed to the birthing center, and it took 30 minutes. It was quick. And while we were traveling there, my contractions actually stopped. I went in, I registered, I let them know my water broke. They didn't know I had started contractions. I did tell them, but they didn't document that. Um, so I went in, my water had broken, I had had contractions, and then they stopped. So when I saw my nurse, I told her that, and she's like, "That's actually pretty normal that when a mom feels stressed or threatened, that her labor will stop." But I was in a dim room, low lit room. I had a yoga ball. I had a birthing tub that I could labor in. I had all sorts of things available to me because it was a birthing center. So they were really interested in letting moms have full control within safe measures, right? Not way outside of what is safe, just like within those safe boundaries. And they had the mobile like vital check that they would put on your stomach, so I wasn't like stuck in a bed strapped through all these wires and lines to a bed. I could move around. I did tell them that I did not want an IV, and so they did want to have an IV just in case there was an emergency or something. So we compromised, and that I was allowed to labor for quite a while without an IV. But right before I, went into like really like the transition to where I was about to give birth, they would do an IV, and that was our compromise, and I was fine with that. I just made it clear though that I did not want pitocin. I did not want any augmentation of my labor, and I knew my body. I knew how it worked, and so that was what we did. And my labor progressed really quickly. I did try to birth or labor in the bath, and it wasn't comfortable for me because it was a hard bath, and so I would try to be on my backside, so sitting, and that wasn't comfortable. And then I would go on my hands and my knees, and it was too hard for my hands and knees, so I didn't enjoy that. It was short lived. I wish that I would have labored in the shower with my birthing partner, with my spouse. I think that would have provided more relief for me personally, but I know it's different for everybody. So I did that for a little while. I rocked in the yoga ball for most of the time. That's one of the things that I found most relief with is rocking in the yoga ball, bouncing. I try to stay upright as much as possible to encourage labor to progress. I didn't want another 36-hour labor or an 18-hour labor or another 16-hour labor. So I wanted to make sure that that labor was progressing without pitocin or artificial like augmentation. So that's what I did. I also found a lot of relief by bending over on the bed. So I was standing on the ground, leaning on the bed, and I would rock. And with my contractions, that gave me some pain relief. And again, dimly lit room, a homey environment, feeling like I was in control and safe. My labor did start back up, no problem, as soon as I felt like I was safe. And so we're in my room. Transition happens right after I get out of the tub where I'd been laboring, and I was like, I feel like I have to go to the bathroom. I have to go poop. And the nurse said, "No, don't do that. Baby will come out. That's how it feels a lot of times." And I knew my body, and I said, "No, I really just need to use the bathroom. Use the bathroom. It was fine." But then I was like, felt like I was going to vomit. I felt sick to my stomach. I felt like the room was spinning, things were blurry. I was in so much pain. And she checked me because in the birthing center, they don't check as often. The nurses don't, just because that's kind of more of the philosophy. They don't want to introduce bacteria needlessly into anywhere the baby is going to be coming out of. So that's what she did. And I was pretty close to fully dilated. I was like, I think an 8, and this was maybe 3 hours into labor from the time that my water had broken anyway. So she checked me, and I was in so much pain. I felt like I was going to die. And I said, "Can I get an epidural?" And I didn't know if I was going to do it or not. I wasn't like trying to prove a point by not getting it. I just wanted to make sure I had as much control over my birthing experience as possible. So she called in um, the anesthesiologist. The anesthesiologist came in, and when I bent over, kind of do this like cat back thing, right, to get the epidural. When I bent over, the baby started to come out. I could feel the head of the baby coming out. But you know what? I kept my mouth shut. I didn't tell them because I wanted pain relief. So they did it. And then as soon as I laid down, they checked me and I was to a 10, which I knew because baby was coming out. I was like crossing my legs trying to keep baby in. Um, and they were like, "Oh, wow, okay." But again, for me, it's the longest stretch is from, 0 to 4 centimeters dilated. And once I get there, it's like, bam, I'm having that baby within half an hour. So, um, I pushed, baby came out one push, no problems. The nurse told me that I could say I had the baby naturally because I did all the hard thing. I went through all the pain without it, but I mean, it is what it is. I had an epidural basically for the pushing. I did still feel it, but it definitely dulled it, which was nice. So I didn't have to experience that ring of fire that they always talk about when you actually push the baby out. So altogether, my entire labor, and really, it's when my water broke. From the time my water broke until the time I had my son was 4 hours, very quick. And I do attribute that to many things. Me having more control. He was a week early. I didn't get induced with him, but he was a week early. My middle two children, number 2 and number 3, had been induced a week early. So, it's not like he was, a lot earlier than them. I really attribute it to me following more natural path, more of the granola path. I think that I felt like I had more control, so I felt safer. I felt more empowered. During my entire pregnancy, I made sure that I was encouraging optimal positioning, staying healthy, going for walks, keeping my body in tip top shape for my athletic event. Really, labor and delivery is an athletic event. um, and the tea that I would have, that maybe it's an old lifestyle, but in my mind, it helped. And like again, it's supposed to shorten the length of labor. I also ate a lot of dates, which are similar. And in my experience, it did work. Whether or not that caused it or it's placebo effect, who knows? But I did have a much more positive laboring experience a lot quicker. Also, when I got to the birthing center, um, it was less chaotic than a hospital. It was more homey, lower lights. I had more control. I could get in the bathtub. I could do whatever I needed to do for pain relief. So I think I felt more in control and my body was more relaxed. So my labor was able to progress more quickly. I also stayed on my feet or upright to try to encourage that quicker labor, which it was quicker, a lot quicker for me. And also it's my fourth child, so that makes things go a little bit faster. But with my third child, it still was 16 hours, my labor. So, I had a much better experience with my fourth child. And yeah, it was 4 hours, pretty easy. One push, baby was out, everything was great, everyone was healthy, my nurse was fabulous. I did not know the family physician who delivered my son. So I met her then, but she was fabulous. I loved her. It was wonderful. And they gave me the option to take my son to pediatrician, or she said, if you want to, she says, I can see your son, I can see you, I can see your children, I can see everybody. And I hadn't had a family physician as an adult. I'd only had it when I was a child. And I remember going to the same physician as my mom. So I thought that was great. I was so excited for that because she was able to care for my son. She was able to care for me. She knew our family. She knew our story. She spent a lot of time with us. And so that's what I did. She was my child's primary care provider, and she was mine, and it worked out quite well for us. Again, it was more of the granola approach, and I had a good experience. It was my second best experience behind a highly medicalized birth. So I don't want to make it sound like there's a right or a wrong way to approach it. It just depends on your circumstances, where you're going to be giving birth, what you're looking for, what is compatible with your body. The one complaint that I did have in the birthing center is they did try to bully me a little bit about pacifiers. Um, my son had been nursing like crazy. His latch was a little wonky, so it did hurt me. Plus, all new moms, when you're breastfeeding at the beginning, it's painful. You get chapped nipples, all of those things. So I just couldn't do it anymore. Like I'd started to bleed, and I was like, he just wants to suck. This is non-nutritive sucking. He doesn't need to eat. He just wants to suck on something. So I'm like, go ask nursing staff for some pacifiers, because we did have some pacifiers. We had bought some in advance, but just as many as possible because you want to try different types because not all babies like the same thing. So he asked, and they kind of laid into him, and they said, well, that's going to interrupt his feeding, and it's going to make it to where he doesn't feed as long, breastfeed, and that's what's healthiest for him is to breastfeed. And my husband's like, yeah, I understand that. My son still wants a pacifier. My wife still wants a pacifier for my son. And I said, okay, well, we need to talk to her. So they came to me and gave me the same spiel, and I said, no, I want a pacifier. And they kind of tried to convince me against it, but I was pretty sure of myself. It was my fourth child, and I breastfed my third child for a year and a half. So I kind of knew all of my kids had pacifiers and bottles. And granted, you could say that's why one of them only breastfed for 4 months, but I think it's just her personality. Actually, I know her now as 11-year-old, and it's just her personality. But anyway, back to my fourth child. And so I said, yeah, I know, I know all of that. And I still want a pacifier. And they made me sign something saying that they had told me and advised against it. And I just thought that was so strange because I knew that pacifiers actually help prevent SIDS. So it was strange to me that they were so um, adamant about it, and that they were like bullying me, really. They were like, it almost felt like they were shaming my decision. But again, I was sure of myself, and we did the pacifier, and that saved my nipples, and it made my son happy. And my son breastfed for 3.5 years. 3.5 years, folks. Yes, I am one of those people. But you know what? It's good for him. Breast milk in the rest of the world, babies will have it for 4 years, whatever. And I wasn't looking to breastfeed my son for 3.5 years. It's just what worked for his temperament and his needs and my own. Um, so it worked out just fine. I remember before I did that, I used to look at moms that would breastfeed for extended periods of time, and I wouldn't think badly of them necessarily, but it was more so just strange to me, just like a foreign concept. Because my mom breastfed, and she breastfed us till about 18 months. So I was used to seeing it a little bit more extended than most, but not to 3.5 years, right? And we did that, and I definitely like when we're in public places and my son would come up and he was trying to breastfeed, and I normally wouldn't when he was older, because I'm like, you don't need this is like a comfort thing, which is helpful for you. But we're going to kind of discover new ways to self-regulate here when we're in public. And I did occasionally breastfeed, but I'd usually put a blanket over or whatever. But I did get some stares, when the son's trying to claw at my shirt and my bra, and it is what it is. But you know what? I wasn't hurting my child. I was sustaining him and giving him the best nutrition that he could have. And he actually had several ear infections, like all of the time, to the point where he had to get tubes. He actually had like what, 2 or 3 sets of tubes. He had his adenoids removed, the whole shebang. And I believe that breastfeeding helped comfort him. He was in a lot of pain. I feel like it had some germ fighting powers, all of those things. So it really helped him, especially because he struggled. And I mean, to the point where he was having trouble learning how to talk because he got so many ear infections. And so I feel like for us, it was the right decision. And for some women, not breastfeeding at all is the right decision. And I think that we shouldn't shame moms who choose not to breastfeed, and we shouldn't shame moms who choose to breastfeed for extended periods. I do think you know, it's just going to be different for everybody, and so let's just leave it to moms and their providers and their child's healthcare providers to kind of come up with what's the best option for them. But that's my birthing story. Very granola. It's my second favorite birthing experience. Um, Stayed there for I think one, maybe two, no, one night after I had him. And he did great. Well, at first he was big. He was 9 pounds 2 ounces, so not totally ginormous. I was 9 pounds 12 ounces, so I was actually a bigger baby than him. But he was also weak early. So 9 pounds 2 ounces. His head was 99th percentile. I mean, had he been my first child, he would have split me in half. But fortunately, he was my fourth, so I was able to deliver him, no C-section or anything like that. But because he was a bigger baby, his body temperature and his sugar levels were out of whack. So we did a lot of skin to skin contact, which physiologically stabilizes baby. So he takes mom's stable temperature, mom's stable heart rate, all those things, the breathing pattern, and he does that. He'll match mom when they have that skin to skin contact. There's also psychological stabilization that skin to skin contact provides for mom, and more likely than not for baby, but we know for mom. It can help prevent postpartum depression. It can help prevent postpartum PTSD, so symptoms of, and more likely than not, turning into the full blown disorders. In any case, a lot of skin to skin contact. It did regulate his body temperature and his sugars. They kept checking them, and I had to breastfeed frequently to try and get those sugars under control. And they almost had to take him because of his sugars, but it regulated. Breastfeeding him regulated it. Okay, within the time frame they needed to be regulated. So no problems. Brought baby home, and my mom was there. My kids bonded. I did not have my children visit us in the birthing center. I also did not notify anybody that my son was born until, well, I notified my mom in my so she could talk to my kids about it within a few hours of giving birth. And then we didn't notify anyone else for half a day to a day later. And the reason why I did that is because I have in the past told people right away, and they are calling constantly, they're texting constantly, they're wanting to use social media to do all these things. And when I lived in town with the rest of my family, there was actually one experience with one of my children where I let people know that were close to me, so family members, that I had my child. And before my kids, my own children, even met their new sibling, um, this person came into the hospital and brought a child. And so they were there handling the baby without my permission. They didn't ask to come there, they just showed up. And I get they were so excited about baby, and I can't be upset that they love my child, the more the merrier, really. But for me and our bonding situation and our family's bonding situation, it caused me a lot of distress. It upset me. I did not like that there was other people meeting my baby and handling my baby before my children were even there to meet their new sibling. So I did not really want to have a repeat of that. I felt like this was an intimate, personal moment that I wanted to keep intimate and personal and have that control over it. I didn't want to feel like I was being violated, um, whether by, healthcare staff or by family and friends. So that's what I did. Now, going home, I did have a lot of support. People wanted to bring me meals like every day for like 2 weeks, and it got to be a little bit of an intrusion for me. Um, you know, First I was like, okay, every day is too much. Say every other day. So people would bring meals every other day, but then they want to come in and they want to hold baby and see baby and talk to mom. And I was just like, I'm a mess. I have chapped, bleeding nipples. I'm walking around half naked all day. The house is a disaster, and my mom had left at that point. I was like, I don't want to feel like I have to entertain people. I appreciate them bringing us food, but I feel like there's a violation of my bonding personal space. So, we did ask people to stop bringing food, which sounds really, like ungrateful, but we were totally grateful. It was just, we had done this before. This was our fourth child. We knew what we needed, and it did help. It helped us bond, um, and it helped things work out. Okay, so that's the bulk of the story. Um, but then there was a twist. So, 3 weeks after my son was born, my husband lost his job, which was, you can only imagine, right? We were living out of state and we didn't have family there. And I had just given birth. And so we packed everything up. I did a lot of lifting, which I should not have done, which was dangerous. I did a lot of packing, not a lot of rest, and it was a traumatic time. Uh, it just not great memories. So packing up, I had to actually have my children help quite a bit, and my oldest was I think 7 at the time. So you can imagine I had a lot of young little children running around. I'm trying to pack. I had just given birth. I had to call my healthcare provider and say, look, here's a situation. My husband lost his job. We're moving back to Nevada. I need to have that, 6-week check early. And so I did have it at 4 weeks. And it was extremely painful at 4 weeks. I would not recommend doing that. If you're going to have your check, stick to the 6 to 8 weeks, not the 4 weeks. It wasn't fun, but it was a necessity. So got checked, everything was fine. And then we moved to Nevada, and it was an adventure. It was a challenge. It wasn't fun, um, but I did still focus on my new baby and bonding, and I think that's part of that 3.5 year breastfeeding, marathon as well. Just kind of I had disruption very early on in our bonding, and so I wanted to kind of form that full bond, and I felt like I was able to do that with time. So that was baby number 4. I made it, you guys. If you've made it through 1 through 4, yay! That was like 2 hours of material. So congratulations. I hope that your pregnancy, if you're pregnant, and your delivery is wonderful, and I hope you the best. Whatever you decide to do for your labor, your birth plan, and just do what works for you, because there's really not any right or wrong way, as long as you're making sure mom and baby is healthy physically and mom and baby are healthy psychologically. So do what works for you. And I'm so happy and excited for all of these mamas that have recently given birth or are pregnant and deciding to give birth in the near future. So congratulations to you if that is one of you. All right, guys, take care.